The rejection, the glittering cage, the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom sparkled with 1,000 points of light reflecting off champagne glasses and diamond jewelry. Celeste Monroe stood near the registration table, her fingers trembling as she clutched her invitation card. The thick cardstock felt expensive, important, completely out of place in her scarred hands. She had debated for 3 weeks whether to attend the Pinnacle Industries annual gala. The invitation had arrived with a handwritten note from the CEO's office explaining that the company was committed to diversity and inclusion, and they would be honored by her presence as a representative of the Phoenix Foundation for Burn Survivors. Translation: We need someone visibly different to prove we care about social responsibility. Celeste knew what she was. A prop, a photo opportunity, someone they could point to in their annual report to show how progressive they were. But she had come anyway because Grace, her best friend and occupational therapist, had convinced her that hiding at home was letting fear win. Now, standing in this sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, Celeste wondered if fear had been the wiser choice. The scarring covered the entire left side of her face, a landscape of pink and white tissue that started at her hairline and cascaded down her neck. 5 years since the fire that had destroyed her childhood home and killed her younger sister. 5 years of surgeries and physical therapy, and learning to meet strangers' eyes when they inevitably looked away. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne. His gaze flickered to her face for a microsecond before he angled his body away, offering the tray to a group of executives behind her without even slowing down. "Excuse me, miss." A woman in a severe black pantsuit approached, her smile professional and cold. Diana Chen, according to her name tag, event coordinator. "I'm afraid there's been a seating issue. Your table assignment was unclear, if you could. Just wait here by the registration area. We'll sort something out." Celeste's stomach dropped. She knew exactly what this meant. They had invited her for the optics, never actually planning where to put her. Somewhere she would be visible but not too visible. Present but not participating. "I can stand if that's easier," Celeste heard herself say, hating the apologetic tone in her voice. "Oh no, we'll find something," Diana assured her with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand before turning to whisper urgently into her headset. 15 minutes passed. Around Celeste, the ballroom filled with laughter and networking and the performance of success. She watched couples glide toward their assigned tables, their name cards waiting on plates decorated with orchids and golden ribbons. She watched business partners clap each other on the back, sealing deals between the appetizers and the keynote speech. She watched herself become invisible despite being the only person standing alone against the wall. "This is fascinating," a deep voice said beside her. "A room full of people who claim to value innovation and diversity. Yet here you are, quite literally pushed to the margins." Celeste turned to find a man in his late 30s watching her with eyes the color of aged whiskey. He was tall, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples and a jawline that belonged in cologne advertisements. His tuxedo was impeccable, his posture confident, but his expression held something unexpected, genuine anger on her behalf. "I'm used to it," she said automatically, then winced. Why had she said that? Why did she always make it easier for people? To dismiss her discomfort? "You shouldn't have to be." He extended his hand. "Vincent Torres, I'm one of the executives at Pinnacle, which means I'm partially responsible for this disaster of an evening." His handshake was warm and firm, his eyes never once drifting to her scars with that mixture of pity and disgust she had learned to expect. "Celeste Monroe." She managed a small smile. "And technically, I'm also part of the disaster. Diversity guest?" "Ah." Vincent's expression darkened. "Let me guess. Big invitation, lots of language about inclusion and representation followed by absolutely no actual planning for your comfort or integration into the event." "They're trying to find me a table," Celeste offered weakly. "They've had 6 weeks to find you a table. The invitations went out in March." He glanced at his watch with theatrical exaggeration. "It's now mid-April, and somehow in 45 days, they couldn't manage to write your name on a place card." Diana appeared again, her smile even more strained. Miss Monroe, we've arranged for you to sit at the media table in the back. It's not ideal, but she'll sit at my table. Vincent interrupted smoothly. Diana's eyes widened. Mr. Torres, that's the executive table. I don't recall asking what you think, Diana. His voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Miss Monroe is my guest. Unless you'd like to explain to the board why we invited someone here explicitly to demonstrate our commitment to inclusion, and then literally excluded her from the event. The color drained from Diana's face. Of course not, Mr. Torres. I'll have a place setting added immediately. As she scurried away, Celeste found herself staring at this man who had just upended the social order on her behalf. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Vincent offered his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. Shall we? Fair warning. My table includes Theodore Bancroft, who will almost certainly say something offensive before the soup course. Also my brother Julian, who's currently in his libertarian phase and thinks all charity is theft. You'll fit right in with the other social pariahs. Despite everything, Celeste laughed. A real laugh that surprised her with its volume. She placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid warmth of him through the expensive fabric. They walked through the ballroom together, and Celeste felt the ripple of whispers following them like a wake. She caught fragments. Is that the Torres heir with? Brave or stupid? Vincent's table was indeed full of interesting characters. Theodore Bancroft, a silver-haired man with expensive teeth, barely glanced at Celeste before returning to his phone. Julian Torres, Vincent's younger brother, gave her a surprisingly warm smile that actually reached his eyes. Everyone, Vincent announced as he pulled out a chair for Celeste. This is Celeste Monroe. She's a graphic designer and survivor. Advocate. Celeste. This collection of social disasters passes for Pinnacle's leadership team. Harsh, Julian said with a grin, but fair. The evening that followed was unlike anything Celeste had experienced in the 5 years since the fire. Vincent engaged her in conversations about design theory and the psychology of corporate branding. Julian passionately explained his new cryptocurrency venture, which Vincent dismantled with surgical precision while making Julian laugh at his own weak arguments. Even Theodore eventually joined in, sharing stories from his early days building the company. No one mentioned her scars. No one stared with that mixture of fascination and horror. No one treated her like a tragedy that needed acknowledging. She was just Celeste. Halfway through the main course, Diana approached their table with a photographer. Mr. Torres, we'd like to get some shots of the executive team for the company. Newsletter. Excellent. Vincent stood, then offered his hand to Celeste. Shall we? Diana's professional smile flickered. Actually, this is just for the executive team. Celeste is at the executive table, making her part of the team for the evening. Vincent's tone brooked no argument. Unless you'd like to explain to our diversity and inclusion department why the Phoenix Foundation representative was excluded from official event photography. The photographer, an older woman with kind eyes, jumped in. The more the merrier. Let's do a group shot first, then some candids. They posed together, Vincent's hand resting lightly on Celeste's shoulder. She could feel the weight of judgment from across the room, but for the first time, it didn't make her want to disappear. As the evening wore on, Vincent's attention never wavered. He refilled her water glass, asked her opinion on the keynote speech about corporate social responsibility, which they both agreed was performative nonsense, and when the band started playing, he did something that made Celeste's heart stop. He stood and offered his hand. Dance with me? The ballroom seemed to pause. Celeste could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward them. I'm not a very good dancer, she whispered. Neither am I. Vincent's smile was gentle. But I'm excellent at not caring what people think. That's a much more useful skill. Celeste placed her hand in his and let him lead her to the dance floor. The band was playing something slow and classical, music that seemed to belong to a different, more elegant era. Vincent's hand settled on her waist and they began to move. Celeste was acutely aware of the stares, the whispers, the phone cameras no doubt capturing this moment for dissection on social media later. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. You don't know me. This could damage your reputation. Vincent looked at her, really looked at her, and Celeste saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not pity, not charity, something else entirely. Do you want the diplomatic answer or the honest one? He asked. Honest. Because the moment I saw you standing against that wall, alone in a room full of people who invited you specifically to be alone, I was furious. Because I went through a divorce last year and spent months feeling like I didn't belong anywhere, even in my own life. Because my ex-wife told me I was too serious, too rigid, incapable of seeing people as anything other than business assets. He spun her gently, and she found herself closer to him than before. And because when you laughed earlier, really laughed, it was the most honest sound I've heard in years. You deserve better than being someone's checkbox on a diversity initiative. You deserve to be seen. Celeste felt tears prickling at her eyes. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. Just dance with me. Let them stare. Let them whisper. Let them take their pictures and make their judgments. Vincent's voice was soft but fierce. You're here. You exist. You matter. And I'd be honored if you'd let me prove that to you. Around them, other couples had joined the dance floor, but Celeste barely noticed. In that moment, in Vincent's arms, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 years. Beautiful, not despite her scars. Not in some inspirational, overcome adversity way. Just beautiful, just human, just worthy of being chosen. When the song ended, Vincent didn't immediately release her. Instead, he leaned close and whispered 6 words that would change everything. You deserve so much better. The transformation the morning after Celeste woke to 17 missed calls from Grace and a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing with social media notifications. Apparently, photos of her dancing with Vincent Torres had gone viral overnight. The comments were a predictable mix, inspiring, so brave. And he must be doing it for publicity. Alongside more vicious observations, she forced herself to stop reading. But there was one notification that made her heart skip. A text from an unknown number. Coffee? I know a place that makes terrible espresso, but excellent conversation. That she stared at the message for a full minute before replying. How terrible. Catastrophic. But they have good pastries and absolutely no social media presence. 10 a.m. Celeste arrived at the cafe to find Vincent already there, looking significantly less polished than he had at the gala. His hair was slightly messy, his jeans were faded, and his t-shirt advertised a band she'd never heard of. He looked younger, more real. I Googled you, Vincent said as she sat down, sliding a coffee and a chocolate croissant toward her. I should have done that before making a scene at the gala. Turns out you're kind of famous. Celeste winced. The fire was big news. House fires that kill children usually are. I'm sorry about your sister. Vincent's voice was gentle. Emma, right? She was 9. 8. Celeste pulled apart the croissant with shaking hands. I was 19, home from college for the weekend. Faulty wiring in the kitchen. The fire spread so fast. I got Emma to her window, but then part of the ceiling collapsed. By the time the firefighters got to us, she couldn't finish the sentence. Vincent didn't fill the silence with empty platitudes. He just waited, his presence steady. They wanted to send me to therapy, Celeste continued. Survivor's guilt, PTSD, complicated grief. I went for a while, but eventually I realized I wasn't just grieving Emma. I was grieving myself, or who I thought I would be. The version of Celeste who didn't have to watch people look away when they saw her face. For what it's worth, Vincent said carefully, I don't look away. I noticed. Celeste met his eyes. Why? Because I've spent the last year feeling invisible while being completely visible. My divorce was public, messy, expensive. Everyone had opinions. Everyone knew the details. But no one actually saw me struggling. He stirred his terrible coffee absently. My ex-wife, Caroline, she married the idea of me. The successful executive, the pedigree, the future CEO. When I started questioning whether I wanted any of that, whether profit margins and shareholder value were really what I wanted to spend my life pursuing, she couldn't handle it. To her, I stopped being the right version of myself. What version do you want to be? Celeste asked. I'm still figuring that out. Vincent smiled ruefully. But last night, watching you walk into that ballroom knowing exactly what you'd face, choosing to show up anyway, that felt like the kind of courage I want more of in my life. They talked for 3 hours. The cafe filled and emptied around them, but neither noticed. Vincent told her about his work in corporate restructuring, how he'd recently started questioning the human cost of efficiency models. Celeste shared her graphic design work for nonprofits, her advocacy for burn survivors, her dream of starting an arts program for trauma survivors. When they finally left, Vincent walked her to her car. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "And I should be clear, this isn't charity or some white knight complex. I genuinely enjoy talking to you. You're funny and smart, and you called Theodore Bancroft's cryptocurrency opinions economically illiterate last night, which was the highlight of my year." Celeste laughed. He did have terrible opinions. The worst. Vincent paused. "But I also want you to know, if this is too complicated, if the attention from last night made you uncomfortable, I completely understand. I won't be offended." Celeste thought about it. The viral photos, the comments, the inevitable scrutiny that would come from being seen with someone like Vincent Torres. 5 years ago, she would have run. Even 5 days ago, she might have. But something had shifted last night on that dance floor, a small, fierce part of her that remembered what it felt like to be chosen. "Thursday," she said. "There's a gallery opening in the Arts District. The artist is a friend from the Phoenix Foundation. His work is about transformation and identity." "I'd love that." Vincent's smile transformed his whole face. "Should I warn you that my brother will probably insist on coming? He's decided you're authentically cool, which is the highest praise in his vocabulary. Grace will probably insist on coming too. She'll want to interrogate you about your intentions." "Fair. My intentions are entirely honorable but enthusiastically interested." They started seeing each other regularly. Not dates exactly, but not just friendship either. Something in between, something undefined. Vincent showed up at the Phoenix Foundation fundraiser and bid an absurd amount of money on a painting Celeste had designed. Celeste attended Julian's cryptocurrency launch party and helped design their marketing materials. Grace and Julian became unlikely friends, bonding over their shared exasperation with their more serious counterparts. But not everyone was supportive. 3 weeks into whatever they were building, Vincent invited Celeste to a family dinner. It was a disaster. Vincent's mother, Patricia, was polite but distant. His father, Richard, barely acknowledged Celeste's presence. But Julian's girlfriend, Monica, was openly hostile. "I just think it's interesting," Monica said over the main course, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "that Vincent's suddenly so passionate about social causes after the divorce. Caroline always said he needed a project." The table went silent. Vincent's jaw tightened. "Celeste isn't a project." "Of course not." Monica's smile didn't reach her eyes. "But you have to admit the optics are good. Successful executive reforms his image by dating a burn survivor. It's very humanitarian." "Monica," Julian warned. But Celeste had heard enough. 5 years of people reducing her to her trauma, to a story, to an opportunity for others to demonstrate their virtue. She set down her fork with deliberate precision. "You're right," she said calmly. "The optics are excellent. Vincent gets to look progressive, and I get to be seen as someone's pity project instead of an actual person with agency and dignity. Except here's what you're missing. I don't need Vincent to make me whole. I'm not broken. I'm a survivor, a designer, an advocate, and a woman who chose to show up at that gala knowing exactly how people like you would react." She stood, placing her napkin beside her plate. "Vincent, thank you for dinner. Mrs. Torres, Mr. Torres, it was lovely to meet you. Monica, I hope you find whatever you're looking for, but you won't find it by diminishing other people." Celeste walked out with her head high, her hands steady. She made it to her car before the tears came. But they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of release, of finally standing up for herself. Vincent found her 10 minutes later. He climbed into the passenger seat without asking permission. his expression a mixture of fury and admiration. "That was amazing," he said. "Your family hates me. My family doesn't know you, but Monica's opinions don't matter. And my parents, they'll come around or they won't. That's their choice." Vincent reached for her hand. "Celeste, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to find the right time, the right words, but after tonight, I realize there is no perfect moment. Just honest ones." He turned to face her fully. "I'm falling in love with you. Not because you're a survivor or because it makes me feel good about myself. Because you make me laugh. Because you call me out when I'm being too corporate. Because you see possibility in broken things. Because when I'm with you, I remember there's more to life than quarterly reports and shareholders and playing the part everyone expects." Celeste's breath caught. "Vincent, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know. Whatever. This is whatever we're building. It's real for me. You're not a project or an image rehabilitation or any of the things Monica implied. You're just you. And you're more than enough." Celeste kissed him then, right there in her car in his parents' driveway. It was clumsy and tear-stained and absolutely perfect. 6 months later, Celeste stood at a podium in front of 200 people at the National Burn Survivors Conference. Vincent sat in the front row next to Grace and Julian, all three of them, wearing matching Phoenix Foundation t-shirts that Celeste had designed. "5 years ago," she began, "I believed my life ended in that fire, not because I died, but because I thought the person I was meant to be died with my sister Emma. For years I let other people tell me what my scars meant, that I was brave, that I was inspirational, that I was a tragedy or a triumph or a teaching moment." She paused, her eyes finding Vincent's. "But here's what I've learned. I'm not defined by what happened to me or what people see when they look at me. I'm defined by how I choose to show up, by the art I create, the people I love, the stands I take when it would be easier to stay silent. Someone once told me I deserved better than being put in the corner, than being made invisible to make others comfortable. He was right. But more than that, I deserved to tell myself I was enough. Scars and all, trauma and all, human and all." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of survivors approached her, sharing their own stories of isolation and eventual self-acceptance. Vincent hung back, letting her have her moment, but his pride was visible from across the room. That evening, back at the cafe with the terrible coffee, Vincent proposed. Not with a grand gesture or a public display, just him and Celeste and a simple question. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you need saving or because I need redemption, because I want to spend my life with someone who reminds me every day what courage actually looks like. Someone who makes me want to be better, not for appearances, but for real." Celeste said yes. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the Phoenix Foundation. No fancy ballroom, no corporate guest list, no performance for cameras. Just people who actually loved them. Grace and Julian, the survivors from the foundation. Vincent's grandmother, who had flown in from Chicago and immediately announced Celeste, was the best thing that ever happened to this family. Vincent's parents didn't attend, but that was okay. They were building their own family now, chosen and fierce and real. As they danced their first dance, Celeste remembered that night at the gala, standing alone against the wall. She remembered Vincent's words, "You deserve better." She had deserved better. They both had. And in finding each other, they'd discovered that better wasn't about being perfect or unmarked by life. It was about choosing to see each other fully, scars and all, and saying, "You belong here, with me, always." The cafe photographer, who had given up trying to make good espresso and now specialized in capturing love stories, snapped a photo of them swaying together, lost in their own world. That photo would later become the Foundation's new fundraising campaign, with a caption Celeste had written, "You deserve better than being someone's charity case. You deserve to be someone's choice." And in the years that followed, hundreds of survivors would see that image and remember. They too deserved to be chosen. They too deserved to dance. They too deserved love that saw them not as broken things to be fixed, but as whole people worthy of being celebrated exactly as they were. No more corners, no more hiding. Just courage and compassion and the radical act of showing up for each other every single day. If Celeste and Vincent's journey moved you, show your love, like, share your thoughts, and subscribe. There's a new story waiting for you on Every Verse Story.